What's going on, everybody? Welcome, welcome. Thanks for joining us for another Church of True Christ Sunday sermon. So we are going to be doing kind of a shorter one today, guys. So we're going to breeze over some things, but we also have an empowering message about a situation that we all kind of just faced in our little spiritual panel group that we kind of want to bring to light. Maybe that can help some of you guys if you end up dealing with this in your own little conscious collective, or if you end up dealing this with, somebody in real life. But nonetheless, let's start off with the Lord's Prayer, the direct Aramaic translation. So if you all will join me for that, let's get ready here. So, O birther, mother, father of the cosmos, you create all that moves in light. Focus your light within us, make it useful as the rays of a beacon show the way. Unite our eye can to yours so that we walk as kings and queens with every creature. Create in me divine cooperation from many selves, one voice, one action. Grant what we need each day in bread and insight. Forgive our hidden past, the secret shames, as we consistently forgive what others hide. Deceived neither by the outer nor the inner. Free us to walk your path with joy. From you is born all ruling will, the power and life to do. The song that beautifies all, from age to age, it renews. Amen. So thanks, guys, for joining us this Sunday. Appreciate everybody being here. So let's start off with this. So we had a little bit of a situation in our little spiritual panel group. And one of the biggest things I want to just relay to everybody today is having discernment with those in our community. And this is kind of a big topic for a lot of us as well, because when we're talking about embodying the values of Christ and embodying the alignment of Christ and his teachings and his principles, we are always very welcoming to those who, want to come in and want to gain an understanding, maybe want to broaden their horizons on, their spiritual evolution and potentially find a sense of community, So we want to have open arms. We want to be welcoming, that is the number one thing, guys, because, a lot of us have struggled. We haven't really had a sense of community, in our spiritual evolution. We haven't really had, a place, or what I would say, a kind of a safety net to discuss a lot of these things we're undergoing and that we're experiencing, and one of the biggest things we can do by accident in this case is let down our defenses and let down our guard. And, it's kind of a double-edged sword. We have Don Rogers and March 4th Productions. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits or energy workers. Exactly. So what I'm getting at here is we want to be open. We want to be welcoming. We want to welcome everybody with open arms and open hands, but we have to have discernment with these people that we're allowing into our community too. We have to kind of look at them through a broader spectrum, because as guys, I'm still healing myself. I know Diana's healing herself still. We're all works in progress with this, and some people have different kinds of healing that they need to undergo and they need to face within themselves. And sometimes if these people have not faced that healing and they have, been negating looking at that side of themselves, it can cause this trauma or this darkness within them to manifest outwardly and potentially start attacking those in the community as well. So we just kind of underwent this experience, and I'm going to pass it over to Diana real quick so she can give a little bit more of a highlight on it. So Diana, let's kind of dive into what we just experienced a little and some of the lessons that we learned from it. So hopefully everybody who's listening or watching right now can also learn from these as well and learn how to exercise discernment with those we allow into our community.
Yeah, and it doesn't come down to just that one person. What it does is it ends up opening up a thing within each and every one of us, because our certain situation ended up causing like a ping ponging that hit everybody on a different note. That because it was so many different variables, it happened so quickly before we were able to be like, whoa, you realize now everybody's egos and their own shadow and their own situations that could otherwise have actually left been buried, not like buried on purpose, but if we're not handed these situations to dissect and unpack, there's moments in our healing that we don't even have realize that we need to heal. And whatever that situation is, and it came for each of us in such a different variable, like everything in the sin level was touched, where it's like you have so many people here that are in the overall group that are just looking to help people, and like this person as well, we were all just interested in helping. And then you can see the way that that can break up. So yes, there is people out there that will come in sheep's clothing, and but my intuition called it from the get-go, so I wasn't overly surprised. But then that goes to, so what happens next time when we have someone come in from, this is my stake, this is my lens on what happened from my point of view, because we each have our own, that it touched something else. Mine was that I didn't listen to my intuition. Mine was that I knew differently. Mine was that other people in the group came to me and told me they felt this as well, but I didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. I didn't want to turn someone away, especially like us. We're like on this Christ path. Christ heals everyone, right? Christ heals everyone. Or does he? Right? And it's like, where do we go from here? Like, what happens next time? Because we don't want to turn anyone away. When people come to us and want to be members, we don't want to like have an interview dissecting process where we all of a sudden seem holier than thou. We want to let everyone in, but we also want to make sure the members in the community feel safe. And it's like you owe them protection inside the community. And like, we do. So where do we go from here? Because you want to honor every soul that comes your way. You want to help them. Like, why are we doing this if not for that? And then where do we start to grow? So we've all been handed, I don't have the answers here, I just have the questions, because we've all been handed a separate piece of this puzzle, because it came through in such a unique way. And I'll only speak on mine because that's what came through for me, that I feel like maybe if I had said something sooner, feelings might have been hurt a little bit, but then nobody would have grown. Because I think the one thing about our community is we are all awake, sovereign, and discerning enough to take the individual lesson that came our way, the individual ways feelings were hurt and things.
You froze up there for a second, Diana, but no, I'm going to kind of carry on what you were saying. It's sometimes when we go ahead, you freed back up. What were you going to say?
Not sure where I froze, but I got to, we could weirdly look at this as a gift, because what other person could bring us such unique individual pings to each person on, like, I want to say not just ego, because we're not that, like, all of us are to a different point where we're not living from that lower ego. So when I'm saying ego, I don't mean that, but there's always points of dissonance in the self. There's always points where more harmony can be made, because if feelings can be hurt, if things can be unraveled, if somebody can be shaken, then that means that's, oh, you're human, right? And it's like, we're looking to go higher, we're looking to go better, we're looking to go bigger. And I think what this truly means at the end of the day, which is in that huge message I sent, is that we're going to come to a place where we can higher solve humanity's emotional and group community problems, because that's essentially the whole issue with the human. You had a bunch of different countries, they didn't get along. Like, this is literally, I know you could sound, it's aggrandizing, this one thing could solve the world, but really, if the human learned to break things down like alchemy, when you break it down, you purify it and you disintegrate the impurities. So by dissecting this situation in us, because we could throw it away and just be like, oh, well, she's just a bad person, and oh, we've been got by somebody, and that's just so terrible. Or we can just come in and look and go, where did this hit me? How and why? Right? For me, it's not listening to my intuition. It's for potentially feeling as like I'm meant to keep everyone safe, and that's like kind of where it's hitting me. And then there was so many different twists. But how did it hit you, Stephen? Like what is your process, so we can see the different point of view and how these kinds of things can look for each individual?
Well, so how it ended up hitting me. So one thing I want to touch on before I say that is, kind of going off with what you said, Diana. We don't want to be these individuals who do these interview processes. We don't want to act holier than now. One thing we're going to have to realize, and we're going to have to keep in our awareness, is what we're going through here right now. Even though we are all on our spiritual evolution. Even though we all are welcoming, Christ into our lives, into our hearts. All right. That doesn't mean there isn't going to be difficult things that we have to do. And there isn't going to be difficult things that we're going to have to overcome. And this is just one of the biggest things. This was the lesson for us. This was a difficult aspect of, our community that we had to overcome. And so the one thing I'm going to say is I really understand with what you're saying. We cannot have fear when it comes to putting up these boundaries that we need to put up as well. And I mean, even saying what, Spinja was saying here, it's hard to know when to say something when you see it, because sometimes we're aware of our own projections and question if it's us or not, because we don't want to hurt anybody if we were wrong. 100%. And I 100% agree with you there, Smidge. But just because we're on our spiritual evolution, and a lot of the times we're focusing on healing ourselves, and we know the healing process is difficult, and through that we're seeing what I would see as an outward manifestation of the healing process when we're dealing with individuals like this. We're having this difficulty being presented to us in an external manner as opposed to an internal one. And I think really what this, it's a test for us who walk with Christ and who are on our spiritual evolution, to sometimes we have to pull up our big boy or big girl pants, and we have to do difficult things, and we have to make difficult decisions. So, I mean, at least from my perspective, how it all affected me was I originally, when this individual came in, she was a friend of a friend, and this friend of mine is, a really damn good friend of mine, one of the best friends I haven't met in person. And so, of course, we want to be welcoming. We want to let everybody in. But what I ended up seeing after we let her in, I saw a lot of these spiritual showboating. And that's what I call it. And what do I call spiritual showboating? Just over talking about the talents. Hi Raquel, how's it going? Good to see you. And over talking their spiritual talents, like very, very much too much in the love of light, and negating the negativity or negating the darkness. So that's one of the first things I see as somebody who could potentially be entrapped in false light. Is somebody who is just consistently focusing on the high frequency, consistently focusing on, the ooh and the ah and the love and the light, not even approaching healing, not even approaching encountering their darkness. So that was the first red flag to me. This is what I started to notice, with her. And then some of the stuff, because, I've been more present in our group chat now as of late after that. But sometimes I'm a lot like, Raquel, I can get overwhelmed by big group chats. So I hadn't been in there as much as I would have liked to have been. But, some of the things slid under the radar, and the first thing that happened that was a red flag to me is when yes, this is spiritual bypassing. That's what I should call it too. Spiritual bypassing and spiritual showboating for sure. Spinja, good one on that. And so, one of the things that was the first red flag to me is when the individual said that you were stealing ideas from her and that you attacked her. And I was like, absolutely not. This is something because I've known you for about over a year now.
And that wasn't even the part that bugged me. So that's funny.
Yeah,
that was not the part I was concerned about.
No, of course. So it's but I was like, and now where it hit me is now she's starting to attack people in our group, and she's
In
starting
such a
to
varied
attack
way
this.
too. So unique, like so brand new, ridiculous thing to each and every person.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you know me, like, you guys are my friends, and I'm not going to let anybody, say anything wrong that's untrue about you guys at all. So of course, I brought it to everybody's attention, and we ended up having the conversation. And how it ended up hitting me is like it wasn't as I wish, and this is a little bit of a different one. So you were talking about your intuition. It's I have the want to be more present in a lot of what we do. And I do my best to make an effort to be present, as much as I possibly can. But because of, my life and the way my life's set up, I get pulled a lot of different directions sometimes. So I was kind of kicking myself in the ass. I'm like, if I had been more present, and I had kind of seen this situation from, the whole spectrum, from everything that has gone down and that has happened, like I probably could have put a stop to it a little bit earlier than I could have, So that's kind of me, is being more present in my community, and, finding and making that time to be more present, to kind of keep a watchful eye over everything that's going on. That's kind of where it hit me. But then I'll retract back to saying, like, guys, we have to understand that everything we're going through right now is not easy. Okay, the spiritual remembrances, the spiritual awakening, the spiritual evolution, embodying the principles and the energy of Christ, living in alignment with Christ, it's a working progress. It's of course we're going to have better days than others, when we come to doing this as well. But when we look at the overall arching theme of the spiritual evolution, it's not an easy thing. Okay. And we can see that we're going to have difficult situations like this, and we're going to have to make difficult decisions, and like I said, that's kind of that outward manifestation of that internal healing, when we have to make that difficult decision in our external existence, whether it means potentially saying no to somebody, whether it means, like, having maybe giving somebody a trial basis, or along those lines, like, see if you fit well with our community, see, like, if you're going to do okay here, and it's going to be one of the hardest things we're up against here in my eyes, because like you said, Diana, we want to be welcoming. We want to welcome everybody. Christ is about acceptance. Christ is about love. Christ is about compassion, it's about community. So it's ultimately, we're ultimately going to have our discernment on high. That doesn't mean let's not be welcoming. That doesn't mean, like, let's not extend our hands out to whoever is interested. But we have to have the discernment with these new individuals and kind of get a reading on them, and see. Thank you, Raquel. Yes, discernment is our superpower, 100%.
Mhm.
And we're gonna have to make those difficult decisions. So that's just the one thing I'm going to say. Yes, Sam, also too, it's about compassionate boundaries. I mean, we talked about this in Loving Thy Neighbor, right? Like, and last week on Loving Thy Neighbor, we talked about how, like, if you were doing something wrong, or you were doing something messed up, right? You weren't doing right by yourself, your family, other humans in your community, you would put boundaries on yourself, would you not? So that's also coming from a space of love, just like how Sam said, it's also about compassionate boundaries. So, setting boundaries is also coming from a space of love too, and it's protecting your energy while also protecting the energy of the other person as well. And it's also protecting the energy of our community. So that's my take. That's how it hit me, and it was a lesson learned, because, like, you guys are my community. I need to be a little bit more present than I have been. There's just been a lot going on in my life, but now after everything that happened, I want to make sure I'm there enough all the time, just so I can, watch over and make sure we can just kind of pick this out. If it does happen to us again. And I know a lot of you out there are going to experience this when you're welcoming people into your community, or what you're trying to do. And my biggest advice for everybody out there who might encounter this situation is understand that we're going to have times where we have to make difficult choices and we have to make difficult decisions. And in making these difficult choices and making these difficult decisions, we have to understand that these are ultimately going to help protect us, our loved ones, our community, and we have to set that boundary up. Yes, we might be looking at another defined focal point. Yes, we might be looking at another one of us, but we also make that realization in that moment that this other version of us or this other divine focal point has a lot of healing within themselves that they still need to address. And a lot of these issues or traumas that are outwardly manifesting themselves from this individual that have not been faced by this individual as well. So in that case, we have to do what's best, for the greater common goal. And we might have to either have this person, and how I would even go about it too, is be like, look, like, I think you'd make a great fit. I think you have some more healing you need to do though. And what I'd like you to do is, thank you, Don. But as I was saying, what I'd like you to do is maybe potentially work on this healing and then come back. There's ways you can deliver this that aren't going to hurt people or aren't going to cause.
That would hurt someone though. That's the thing though. There's not. That would hurt someone badly.
You think so? Yeah.
Oh, 100%. Trust me, I gave it every.
Okay.
There's no. I wish in an ideal society, you're not wrong but we're talking about someone that's in sovereign discernment. That would be in sovereign discernment, and that's where the mistake was made, or there was no mistakes. That's the whole part of actually this whole thing. There was actually no mistakes. Sometimes things just happen, and you just deal with it and then try to implement better for the future. So absolutely down for the ideas of what we could possibly bridge to someone
it's still gonna hurt though. Yeah.
But there was no sovereign discernment. And that's the one thing that was okay. So just a note to anybody, and all love and lights, whatever language you use, and I honor that. And I love all different beings. But if you notice, and I repeat this often in just my own teachings, the only being that matters is your higher self. So if you're encountering people in the community, and I found Facebook, which is ripe with this. And this is why I don't touch Facebook. Things auto stream there, but I don't really go on it, because you'll have people be like, they'll barely even say their name. They'll have some tag name of what their name is and say, I'm a dragon worker. I'm a member of the this and this, and I'm a this and that, and I'm a this and this. And that's who they are, filled with tons of emojis. And it's like, okay, that's not who you are. The beings you work with, that's fantastic. I love energy streams and frequencies and all the beings that we can attach to work with. There's so many fourth dimensional entities, as well as higher fifth dimensional entities, and even beyond that, waiting and willing to work with us. And that's great. But if you are not in sovereign, discerning Christ alignment, then you're not going to be going to the highest and the highest place. So all love and light to you and on your path. But that is not where our community is heading. And that is not where we as individuals within our community have chosen to go towards, because that is a lot of the time the harder path, because it means at the end of the day, anytime something happens, even with an outside person, you come to yourself and you find where in yourself that was allowed to happen. And it doesn't even have to be personal. It can end up just coming down to like an energy frequency. Like if we're talking about boundaries here, the most essential boundaries are your actual auric field. So if something's coming in, if we even have a need to make personal boundaries, we already have a dissension in the ranks of our auric field. So that is a lesson right there and then, that we have higher to go on creating. And so does a lot of people. So this isn't putting any of us down, where we need to make higher auric fields, because the truth is like when the higher you go, that's not even kind of going to come across your path. The higher you go, because I have other situations that have just never come across my path, and this situation hadn't come across my path ever personally, but I'd seen people like that back in my early days of spirituality, where I was trying to find places. And this is why I went the solo route for a very long time, because I found no places. This is why this has been a few months going. I lost time, is really weird right now, but that we started this community, because if you can't find it, make it. And we couldn't find a perfect spiritual community. So we're making one. And we actually have a really fantastic group that's doing really well, all check marked on the box of sovereign, discerning, Christ-led living. It doesn't have to be Christ, whatever they want to call it. They all have different names for what they call it. You've met a lot of them on the consciousness panel, and there's more that you haven't met yet that are in that place of higher. By you, I mean the audience. Higher growth period. We could still call it growing because you're always healing, but pretty much most of us are not even healing the older stuff, despite what stays in the shadowy past forever kind of thing. There's always that permeating primordial darkness, but like the healing is just constant because as you continue on, we are literally, what do you say? Terraforming space. We're creating the matrix. We're expanding all of reality with what we do in our everyday life. And then bringing together the community like we have is to help perpetuate an organic matrix of future living that we are the choosing of, that we are the creators. We're not waiting for someone to tell us the rule, the law, the way to be, the tradition to follow, the meditation to do, though we all do share our own things. And we grow from that. We pick and choose what works for us. And it's just a constant way of just talking about our pain and dealing and discussing. It's a safe space. It's a growing space. It's a learning space. It has so many beautiful things to make a beautiful future. And this has been our first hiccup. And we have actually done very well considering, but it's definitely a growing space where not all answers are there, because I would like us all to grow much further and much further and much further to like really make a mark on all of the world. And the more we can dissect it and perfect it, like alchemy, literally, this philosopher's stone here we're creating, it's just the better everything ends up in the end.
Absolutely, and I agree with everything you just said, Diana. And yeah, and maybe yes, maybe you're right. Maybe that it would come off. What I said would come off, a little bit.
No, you're the yang, I'm the yin, though. That's the thing, though,
Yes.
right? Like
Yeah.
yours is
Yeah.
the very
So
direct way, and I see the emotional side behind it. This is the whole point of the yang yin, because you're not wrong, and that's the whole point. Like there's something we can think in the middle where it's truly not hurting anyone's feelings, and that would be only getting to the point where we just select them and they don't know.
well, so the other thing too, kind of I want to add as well, and this kind of adds into that, what we're going through right now isn't the easiest thing. We're experiencing a whole new breakthrough of our realities, our internal world. We've had our concepts of reality smashed over and over and over and over again. So this is not an easy thing, that we're undergoing here. And ultimately, I'm going to go back to what Sam said too. Friction is sometimes going to be inevitable in this. And, we are going to have these moments where we're going to be tested in our healing as well. And this was, I think, we know the divine tests us. We know that, Christ will also test us. He will steer us, in these directions for these learning experiences that we're undergoing as well. And ultimately, the biggest thing we're going to have to understand is, yes, friction sometimes is going to be inevitable. We're going to have these moments. Now, and the other thing I was going to say too, with this not being easy, and this is just a personal reflection point from my own story and my own healing. Some of the hardest lessons that I've learned, in my spiritual evolution were not sugar-coated by any means. They were delivered to me in the most stinging, painful fashion that any lesson, at least in my experience, any lesson I've ever had could have been delivered to me. And, and sometimes we have to understand, not that it's our place to deliver a lesson that way, or, it's not, but we might be that aspect of the divine that does end up delivering a message that way. And ultimately what that will cause is that will, and it can have two outcomes in that situation. It can cause spiritual alchemy, because a lot of the times some people who are in this position in their evolution, what they're going to end up doing is they get that painful lesson. They get that stinging lesson, and it's going to drive them closer to the light. They're going to gain an understanding that this is something I need to work on about myself. This is something I need to heal. I have to end up facing this about myself. And what's going to happen is that stinging lesson that's delivered to them, and I'll even say that, I mean, even growing up, you guys know how much of a avid health and fitness enthusiast I am, but growing up I struggled with my weight. And when you're at the pool and you got kids calling you a fat ass because like you're overweight and you didn't know, or your parents didn't raise you with healthy habits or anything along those lines. I mean, that's stinging. You hear that enough over time, that's stinging. And then ultimately what that ended up doing for me was like, hey man, you got to take control of your life. You got to take control of your health. You've got to fix this aspect of yourself, and so what a lot of the times we'll see in these instances when these stinging lessons are delivered by the divine, whether it be through us, as a mouthpiece for the divine, or there's a scenario that unfolds in that person's life that gives them that stinging lesson. You can see spiritual alchemy come out of that. But then also, too, depending on where that person is, it might cause them to regress even further as well. So that's the other caveat, to these stinging lessons and to this inevitable friction that we're going to experience here, and really what maybe we should entertain looking at and maybe entertain exploring is that other aspect of it for those who might regress when they get that stinging lesson. But ultimately, if we're looking at that regression state too, I mean, that individual has their own free will in that aspect as well. They can choose that route of regression from hearing maybe this painful lesson, or they can choose the other road. That's completely up to them. So that's just something I wanted to add into what you said. And, I'll digress. We're going to, hold on. Don said something here. Sometimes you can't interfere with others' karma as well. These lessons need to happen. Sometimes I'll completely agree with you, Don. We have Canadian Spinja. We're remembering helping each other find our pieces. We learn from each other and we inspire each other too. Stephen has been making me get my notebook for topics to further research from Jump Street. Thank you, Spinja. And then we have Sam. The healings are definitely speeding up. Absolutely. And Raquel, we are mastering both light and dark is 0 point. Absolutely, guys. So that's just something I want to add. And I wanted to start off the show with this. Because I know me and Diana are not the only ones out here. I know we're not, who have decided to create a community, who've decided to kind of gather people, who have their head, their hearts, and their hands in this, whether they call it Christ, whether they call it the divine, whatever they choose to label their spiritual evolution and what they work with as. We know we're not the first people to be doing this. And so for all of you out there who might decide to start a community of their own, might decide to start some kind of church of their own, or even a spiritual panel or a podcast with other people, the number one thing we'll say is there are going to be times when it's difficult and you're going to have to make difficult decisions. Understand, at least in my perspective, this is an aspect of your internal healing that is manifesting on your outward experience, on your external experience. And for me, a lot of the times it can be a potential test. I know a lot of us used to be people pleasers, you know what I mean? And that's one of the biggest things that, we try to do away with in our spiritual evolution. We don't no longer want to be people pleasers, that removes us of our authenticity, that removes us for, we know how big our authenticity is when it comes to our spiritual evolution. And real quick, Sam added this in. We have, we're not responsible for others' healing, but we are only responsible for how we act and respond. It's a balancing act. Absolutely, Sam. Agreed. And Spinja agrees as well. Anything else you want to add on that, Diana, before we kind of breeze through these next couple of things, or?
No, it's because it would just be more theorizing, because we're working on it. We want to make the best thing possible and always do the right thing possible. I do have one point there on people pleasing, because a lot of the time there's a narrative that people pleasers are, they're just buttholes, they're just weak and they can't be true. No, a lot of people pleasers, I met a lot of them in the spiritual community. They actually are genuinely nice people, but what they had is the lack of the ability to say their truth without hurting your feelings. So hurting feelings is what we need to work on, and being able to hurt feelings, even though we don't want to, and it hurts us to hurt feelings, and we don't want to hurt feelings. And like sometimes it's a game of choosing, like, because people pleasing is dishonoring yourself, but hurting your feelings, I guess, is probably the better way to go. I mean, I don't want that to be the answer. I want an answer that's not hurting someone's feelings, but where everybody is honored.
I had to throw that up there, Don. And I had to throw that up there. Go ahead. What were you saying, Diana? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's true. In Rock Alley, yeah, people pleasing is a trauma response. But then I think it's true. It is a trauma response because once upon a time, hurting someone's feelings meant we got physically assaulted usually, and very verbally assaulted, probably more than physically, because of the grown-ups in our lives that were supposed to protect us. And we learned to walk around people's egos because otherwise we would be got in some way, shape, or form in each of our own little unique upbringing. So that is so completely true. That is so completely true. But there's one thing I have absolutely tested, because this used to actually worry me, is, am I even a good person, or am I just a people pleaser? But I have brought myself to so many different testing zones where nobody's looking, nobody's watching, no one can hear what I'm thinking. And I've decided I'm a good person. I've decided
Absolutely.
Like my inner instincts are actually the right thing. And not because in moments where no one's looking, like I'll pick up the trash, like in moments where no one's looking, I'll do the right thing. And that is more often when no one's looking, because we get so many different variables with the judgments of others and all these things that we're working out as humans to learn to be a human. That's nice, but not walked on. Because as we go through the split, a lot of us are going to be getting a lot nicer. A lot of us are going to want to be living heart-centered, divine alignments, because we want our highest path. We want to do the right thing. And that can be even selfish because we want a better reality. But we genuinely do want to help everybody possible along the way to have a better life. And we don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but unfortunately we're in a split. And one thing that comes as a rude awakening is that some people are not, I don't know if it's a 2 split, that's apparently it, but we're seeing a lot of micro splits, and there's people in the spiritual community that are not part of the highest alignment. And like, I don't mean that in any type of way. They're just not part of my highest alignment. That isn't something that makes my heart feel good. And I don't think anybody's heart would feel good in the highest alignment if they're going around trying to cause fighting, because we've had discussions in our group where we don't agree. Like, this isn't a matter of agreeing. This is a matter of actual insidious activity, like truly insidious activity in multiple different avenues. So we know right away we're not dealing with a being of light. And then still yet we find it hard to hurt feelings, to say our truth, to stand up for ourselves. Because as spiritual people, that does come with a certain amount of limitations. And maybe we were never trained the right way to stand up for ourselves. I know that's a lot of my situation in my family. If you were fighting, it would be like, there'd be a lot of F words in it, and it would eventually turn to blows. So like, we weren't raised, or even sibling environments, or perhaps even the old way we used to operate our friend groups, in healthy ways. Like, probably a lot of us came from just drinking with our friends and not even, you know what I mean? Like, we don't have dynamics of healthy human interactions to a large enough degree. We read about them from other people that seem to be doing it, and we see about it on TV probably. But a lot of us in this growing, awakening spiritual community, where I think all of us agree we have trauma, means that we don't have a subconscious foundation for healthy human interaction. And moments like this can show us where we can even stand in our truth and be firmer, because it's easy enough to stand up to like a commenter on YouTube and stuff like that. Like, I have no problem with that. But when somebody says they want to be saved and they want to be part of the community, and they have all this pain themselves, and they're like a wounded bird that needs and wants healing, it's hard to just then, but you're abusing us along the way. But you are trampling, like, when people take their victim mentality and make it your problem, that's where we now need to develop language. And when they're not coming at you like an obvious aggressor, when they're coming at you like this wounded bird, but this wounded bird that's hurting you and hurting the friends in the group, that's where we need dialogue, where we'll just have to work on, where we'll just have to tease out. And because I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but we also don't want to let ourselves and others get hurt along the way.
Well, here's the other thing I'm going to add to this. We'll kind of just expand on this because you brought up a very, very point. Because you brought up the spiritual pushover notion. Because when we look at the general consensus of the spiritual community, and this is even I'd even say modern Christianity included along these lines, is they a lot of people in the general collective, they look at the spiritual community as a bunch of pushovers and pacifists when in all reality we're not. A lot of us choose peace, because we've experienced the other side of not choosing peace, and we see what happens when we don't when we try to choose peace and people don't want to choose peace, and then we're forced to go another road. So one of the things I wanted to add to what you just said, I mean, let's even just entertain this for a sec, is sometimes putting your foot forward and being crass, is sometimes putting your foot forward and being blunt, a way of protecting our energy. And one of the things I would absolutely say is yes, absolutely. It is a way of protecting our energy. And a lot of people think, like it's not a spiritual thing to do. We see that come forth. And a lot of us have experienced that in our day-to-day lives. Somebody's encroaching upon our boundaries, and, they know we're a spiritual person, and we get a little blunt. We get a little bit upfront, and we put our foot down, and we say, no, I'm absolutely not doing this. We might even curse. We even curse in the process. Of saying this, and that person goes, well, that's not very spiritual of you. And we've heard this response in our spiritual evolution, whether it be from loved ones, whether it be from friends. And one of the biggest things I want to say is that's the furthest from the truth. A lot of us in the spiritual community are, I'm going to use the cleaner term of this. I'm going to use the cleaner term, are mess around and find out. A lot of us in this community are that way, and that's one thing I just want to throw out there for everybody, that while yes, on our spiritual evolution, we play non-attachment with our beliefs, and we give a space for others to discuss their beliefs and their opinions. Yes, on our spiritual evolution, we want to take the path of peace. Those are the ultimate things that we want to sway towards. Of course, this is what we want to do. But ultimately, we are going to be approached with times where our energy is being taken from. There are going to be people who do not associate or recognize reasoning and taking the peaceful way out. So, and this is something I think a lot of us question on our spiritual evolution. Like, is it okay to do that? And what I'm going to say to a lot of people, especially all the viewers and the listeners right now, is if you've played non-attachment with your beliefs, if you've given them the space, if you've tried to use, the reasoning, you've tried to stand in peace during this interaction or this altercation or whatever you're having, and this individual does not recognize or associate with anything, then it is okay. And I'm telling you, it is okay at that point to protect yourself, your energy, and your community by putting your foot down, getting a little bit blunt, getting a little bit crass, okay, and kind of showcasing that your energy and the energy of your community needs to be protected. There needs to be a boundary placed there. And even just kind of what Spinja just said right now, there is also a huge difference between rolling over and walking away in peace. Absolutely. There's a massive difference. Rolling over is stifling your authenticity and allowing them to continue to take that energy from you. You know what I mean? And continuing for them to go on the path that they're going on. However, putting your foot forward, kind of like what we ended up doing in this situation, is calling it out and as polite of a way as you possibly can. Still try to use that reasoning, still try to use that piece. And if that individual does not recognize or associate with what you're trying to do, then that's when you walk away in peace. That's what you have to do in that instance. So that's the one thing I want to clear up with everybody, because that's something we encounter a lot, even in modern Christianity. When Jesus says turn the other cheek, and that's something a lot of people see as almost being pacifistic and rolling over. To me, turning the other cheek means walking away in peace. It doesn't mean letting your energy be letting them take your energy. It doesn't mean being a pacifist and rolling over. It means, setting your boundaries in the most peaceful way that you can and walking away in peace. So that's something we have to consider as well, because, it doesn't mean pacifism. It means choosing peace in the majority of the time. And when the individual you're either interacting with, whether it be somebody who has darkness within them, or whether it be somebody who needs some more healing and they don't recognize that, that's when you put your foot down and you emanate your spiritual authority in that aspect. And you shouldn't feel bad about doing so, because ultimately that other person is taking from you in that aspect. What do you want to say? I see you want to say something. Your mic's muted. Here, you turn it on real quick. Let's see what you
This has always bothered me with the Jesus story, and this is the only part, and I don't think Jesus is wrong. It just reminds us that we're not there yet. But because I not only think Jesus did actually mean turn the other cheek and let them slap that too. I actually do think he meant that, unfortunately. But he, remember, also let them crucify him to death. He let them. He was that much of a pacifist. However, he was that much of a master, because in the place Jesus was, he was in a higher realm where that did not affect him. It did not affect him. And this is where, this is part of the reason I got into toxic positivity years ago. For real, I was really into laying myself out and taking all I could take to just be Jesus, because Jesus did lay his life down for everybody. He actually did. So he did, though. And we need to get to that place. But I do think that there is a road, because the truth is karma is very real. And Jesus would have known this. But we are not at that. We get a slower growth. That's just the way it is. That's what we signed up for. Jesus came in already ready to go. He was higher inputted, however you want to believe that happened. He was a higher input, and that is for sure. And we can absolutely get to that space. We just have a slow, because he was already at that space and dead by 33. So imagine that. I mean, we're both 37. So we're already past that point. So clearly we're kidding ourselves if we're not realizing we're going slower. But that's okay, because I would also go through manically trying to be that, or dwelling on the fact that I couldn't, because karma is very real, and we can accrue karma for ourselves. I keep losing my words. We can build karma for ourselves. We can betray ourselves. So if someone slaps us on the cheek and we turn and let them slap the other cheek, we just hurt ourselves, and that's going to give us negative karma. So there's so much for us to build towards.
It's not black and white.
Exactly, because we can be at that space, though. This is the thing. It's just realizing I signed on for the harder path. We're Blu-rays. We're the third, star seed in Ashiana Dean's references. There are paths that are said to be high. The reason why, though, if you want the reason, is because all those DNA lines that we all came from, they need to be upgraded as well. So we had to come through in those DNA lines. We had to have similar trauma so that we would start in that matrix, and then we would slowly climb our way out of it. Imagine the web pulling as you go. And what happens? They're going to follow. And that's just the science of the universe. So we went into these darker lines to pull out those DNA lines, to pull them out. Jesus is apparently from a high status Jewish line. So Jesus's bloodline and Jesus's story, though we love the Christ energy, and we can get to Jesus's space, but for us, that could mean farther. And we have more, I doubt Joseph was beating Jesus. You know what I mean? He didn't have the same stories that we have to go through. And he had all his disciples around him for people to come through him to speak to him. He wasn't out there on the front lines like we are. If you know Matthias DiStefano, I imagine he has a similar situation. He's very surrounded at all points. Everything he needs is taken care of for him because that's his divine path. And we could, because he's the same age as me, and we could sit around and boohoo about that. Oh, he's got an easy ride. Sarah herself, the alchemist, who we all love, has told us, and she wants us to know this, that she didn't have that hard of a ride, that she had everything. Like she had like she wasn't rich in her childhood, but as soon as she became an adult, it's like the divine rolled out the red carpet for her to bring her to where she is now. And she's doing a fantastic job, and that's her place, and that's wonderful. But each of us, and we don't want to boohoo about this. This is we don't want victim mentality, but this is where we have a very unique job of they're up there anchoring that higher, and they show us possibilities that we can achieve. But we're also almost like creating the spirituality middle class. Like we're creating like this middle class zone of spirituality where we're beings out of trauma that are actually authentically going to learn to 100% live in light, and whatever that entails. And we get to invent that. And that's pretty cool.
Well, one of the things I want to add to that too is this: we know the hardest paths are the most rewarding. And just because they had an easier time, all right, maybe that was set up so they could do what they do. And the one thing we have to realize about ourselves, though, is through these harder paths that we're going through, we could very well end up not only at a similar outcome as them, but potentially something even higher. And that's something too we have to hold in our awareness also. Just because you were dealt a different card in life, or you were dealt a harder card, or you had more trauma, doesn't mean you're any less than these
people. You're more. You're more.
Absolutely.
In a big way, you're more.
Absolutely. So yes, what Diana's saying, yes, is absolutely on point in my eyes too. But also just hold in your awareness. Just because you're having more healing to do, you look at as a good example. Like look at as something that needs to be cast over a longer period of time than something that doesn't have to be cast. We're talking about a metal, right? And we know that metal that has to be cast over that longer period of time is going to have more perfection. It's going to have this beauty at the end that maybe that other piece of metal that took half the time to cast might not have. So look at it as a beautiful thing. You know what I mean? That you're undergoing this healing, you're destroying these generational curses, you're clearing your genetic lineage of this, you're giving everything a fresh slate. And so yes, while we see people like Sarah, we see people like Christ, we see people like Matthias de Stefano who have, might have had this amazing, like freaking what might seem like a free ride to the spiritual. They have their purpose, we have ours. And that's something that we have to hold in our awareness too. I did want to add a little bit of humor to what you said about Christ, getting slapped and turning the other cheek. So there was a South Park episode. I'm going to throw this in there. I know we're talking about South Park at church, but it really kind of hits the point home for what Diana was saying. So there was an episode where Cartman, he created the red-headed cow. Right. And in this episode, the red-headed cow, like he took a cow and he made it red-headed. He put a red wig on it. He put red spots. But in this episode, the coming of the cow was in the Judeo-Christian religions, the sign of the apocalypse. It was the sign of this, whatever it is. And, so it ended up causing peace in the Middle East. It ended up causing like all, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam to like unite together. They were all having this party and listening to a Van Halen concert. I know it's funny, but Kyle found out that Cartman had lied about this cow, but he didn't want the lie to get out because he saw how it caused all of this peace. Like there's peace in the Middle East now. All of the Judeo-Christian religions are like celebrating together and unifying and things like this. So Cartman started to blackmail him in order for him to keep the secret. But this is an example of what Jesus did and what Diana was like talking about, because Kyle was accepting Cartman farting on his face and saying that his farts were delicious, all in the name, and he didn't even care. He was like, I will take this on. You know what I mean? I will take this punishment, this torture, this humiliation on, because I know if I take this on, peace will remain. So this is just a kind of an example of where Christ was at. I wanted to throw that in there, just to add on to Diana's explanation, although it's a South Park episode and we're talking about South Park and church.
No, that
it's
fit
still
perfectly. It did.
It does. So that kind of goes along with what you were saying there. But nonetheless, I'll digress and get back to what we were saying. Just because we talk about how the phoenix rising from the ashes, right? We talk about how when we go through our spiritual alchemy or healing, and working through this, we are the phoenix rising out of the ashes. And the thing about us is you might do that quite a few times in your spiritual evolution. You might rise as a phoenix a few times, but ultimately look at that process as more refinement for yourself. One of the biggest messages that's been delivered to me is refinement of ourselves, refining how we interact with people, refining how we go about delivering our message, refining our healing and all of these different things. So think of your process as having more refinement. Of course, when you see something that goes through more refinement, we have a purer product in the end, do we not? So using that analogy, we can kind of move forward and know, well, yes, you might have to turn lead into bronze first. You might have to turn lead into silver first, and then you might get to the point where you turn it into gold. And don't allow that to stifle you. Don't allow that to stifle you, Don. I swear to God, we're gonna have to do the laugh challenge, again with you, like how you do on your show. But no, we cannot recreate the Last Supper at Casa Bonita, but that would definitely be fun. But again, guys, just because we look at somebody like Christ who potentially didn't have that hard of an upbringing, and maybe had more of a clear way, that doesn't mean that you cannot get there as well. You're just going to go through a little bit more refinement. And like I said, the more things get refined, the purer the product you have at the end. So don't let it get you down, guys. Real quick, I don't know how much longer you got, Diana. I wanted to breeze over a couple of things, a couple of the topics that we had in the title today. How much longer do you have? Do you think you can hang out for another 10, 15?
Not much longer, so we can either save it for next week or we can go through it quickly.
All right, so the only thing I want to bring up that I think is the most important, we'll breeze over them real quick, guys. So the one thing, we'll just kind of give this to you as homework to research. How's that sound? Let's do this, and then we will touch on them next week as well. I actually liked where we took today. I think it was good. I think it was a good learning process for everybody. We got 97 people watching right now. I want to thank all of you guys for being here and checking out Church of True Christ, where we kind of dive into the real aspect of embodying Christ, and that's healing ourselves so we can accept Christ into our being and the alignment of Christ into our being more. So, guys, I want you guys to check out Resurrectionist Christianity. I definitely want you to expand your horizons on what you see as Christ. Remember here, guys, dogma and fundamentalism are man-made authorities. The divine does not work in dogma and fundamentalism. It does not. Christ does not work in dogma and
even the laws of the universe. You can play one against the other. Like even the laws of the universe, like cause and effect and things like karma, right? They're not 100%. They all are mobile too.
Exactly. So, guys, one of the biggest things I can tell, if there's any modern Christians sitting here with us today, is understand that dogma and fundamentalism are man-made. All right. And I know you guys out there want to follow Christ. You want to follow the divine. So, at least in our eyes here at Church of True Christ, in order to fully accept Christ as he truly is, as he accepts you, as you truly are, you have to get rid of the man-made authority. You have to get rid of the man telling you what is right. You, as a sovereign human being that has Christ and the divine within them, has the power and has the authority to choose what's right for your spiritual evolution. The church is not a place of authority. The church is a place of congregation. The church is a place of discussion, as we're having right here, right now. I'm not here to tell you that you're interpreting the scriptures wrong. Okay, you are going to have your own perspective of the scriptures.
And something that old is only subject to personal opinion. It's written that old. They've proven even 100 years ago the lingo isn't the same. So it doesn't matter how good we're going to translate. We're not going to understand the lingo and the way they actually phrase things back then. So it truly is all personal opinion. Not that that doesn't mean beauty can't be taken from it, because we can take beauty from everything. That's what the human does. And the Bible is a good source. There's lots of things in there, but with discernment.
Absolutely. So that's the one message I want to do. So check out what I would say the new church, and check out Christian Science. Those are two little tidbits of homework I'll give to you guys. Also, the Jesus fish. The number one little bit of homework I want to leave with everybody is researching the Jesus fish and its origins, and a lot of the symbolism in Christianity and its origins as well. And what I think you'll come to find is you will see that Christianity has a very deeply metaphysical background. And we've touched on this show before as well, that metaphysics and Christianity work hand in hand. They complement each other. So that's the other bit of research. And the other bit of research, we've been asking the question a lot lately: what happened to Jesus from the ages of 12 to 30? This is where it would come down to the Jesus Kriya Master aspect of our title right here. Christ had a sabbatical from the time he was 12 years old to the time he was 30. Some say 13. And then he returns, and Christ is a very different individual when he returns at this period of time. And we have a lot of different theories and a lot of different negating speculations on this, but we come to find that we find a lot of these mosaics from the East, including places like India and Tibet, that depict a Caucasian man, that looked very similar, if not almost uncanny, to Christ. And then we look at the very ancient art of Kriya Yoga. And we see that at the Yogananda Institute, you guys can research the website you want. I'll even as soon as we get done, I'm going to have to edit the episode title and stuff. I'll drop a link in the description as well. Christ is a revered Kriya Yoga master. So how could Christ become a revered Kriya Yoga master? In fact, he is spoken about in Vedic texts as early as 100 AD. He's spoken about in these Vedic texts. So this is something I, would encourage you all to do. Let's have a thought experiment. Let's think about Christ and where he could have potentially have gone, from the ages of 12 to 30. And is this something that can be important for us embodying the teachings and the principles of Christ? I absolutely think so. Because if Christ brought almost a form of Eastern practice, into, Israel, into Jerusalem at that time, you have to think that maybe there's something we should be looking into there. So nonetheless, I want to thank now all 102 of you who are watching. Thank you so much for joining us for another Church of True Christ. We hope you learned something today. We hope we imparted some wisdom on you when it comes to dealing with new members in your community or your church. Don't be afraid to understand that there are going to be difficult times and difficult decisions and difficult actions in your spiritual evolution, and do not shy away from that. Other than that, guys, thanks for joining us. We will be back next Sunday. Diana, do you want to leave anything with everybody before we go?
Just that we're growing, and we're growing together. And it's good to learn that discussions are not arguing. And this is within just when you're talking about these things after that, we're just discussing. And sometimes you say disagreeing things, but you just keep the discussing. And as a growing community, we get a real chance to display that the ego is not in control anymore, because when your ego is put to the side, it's discussing, and it's good. It can be painful. It can be uncomfortable. It doesn't mean it's going to be pleasant, but it's going to be productive. And then we just keep maturing like that. And we keep finding ways to talk to other people than people that are completely off our wavelength. We'll need to work on that, because we do want peace and love for everybody to grow, because a lot of us from our traumatized pasts, like a lot of us are coming online with sovereign discernment, but a lot of people are not. But then we equally feel for them, because they were probably just as beaten and yelled at as the rest of us. So you see yourself in them. You see the wounded bird is really you. You're seeing yourself, and you want to go back and save you. Except envision how you would respond. How would you respond if you went back and did that to you? You would probably have happily have grabbed that hand and been so absolutely grateful. Or maybe not, but you could see the place you were at that time and why you would say no. And then likewise, let that help you play out the situation. Because if you offer a hand to somebody and they bite that hand, you have to use your discernment and ask yourself, because you need to also treat yourself as vulnerable. We want to be warriors, but you need to look at the vulnerable part of you and go, how are you feeling about this? Because we do want to help other people, but I think we're doing a detriment at a certain point when we all get pulled down, and then the whole group gets tainted and everything starts swirling. And then we just have to just work on that, because we're literally developing thought patterns here. We're literally developing communication styles for avenues because we don't treat such people as insane. We don't treat such people as like they're not telling a truth that is their truth, because we know how perceptions work. We know that their truth is their truth. We know that the things they think and say are real. That's how complicated these situations get, because you want to have compassion for that, yet at the same time not go down with the ship. And all we can do is keep practicing and getting better. So all love and light to absolutely everybody, and we still want people to feel welcome to come and just explore in these spaces with us. So thank you to everybody.
Absolutely. Diana, so we got a new listener with an interesting question. If you don't have time, I'll answer it real quick, but if you have a couple minutes, let's do it real fast. So we have Out of the Blue Phoenix, thoughts on a reincarnated avatar of Jesus Christ. So I'm going to give my perspective real fast. Out of the blue, thanks for being here today, man. We appreciate you checking us out. So this is my thing. So the way I see it is, we look at the embodiment of Christ energy. We look at the embodiment of that, because we're of the frame of reference here at Church of True Christ that Christ has always existed since the beginning. Christ is a layer of this reality, and it is also had many embodiments. So we look at the embodiment of Christ known as Osiris. We look at the embodiment of Christ known as Ahura Mazda. We look at the embodiment of Christ known as Mithra, and then we look at the embodiment of Christ known as Yeshua. So we see that this aspect of this existence has had many different avatars and many different embodiments throughout the ages. So on a reincarnated avatar for today's age, my opinion on this would be this. So, and this is based on my experiences that I've had interpersonally. So as far as an objective reference point, I'm going to go ahead and tell you I don't have one for that, but I'm going to give you my opinion based on my experiences real fast. Before, we only had one embodiment that would make a appearance here, and it would end up, delivering the message of awakening to those who listened, and ended up, moving on. So what I'm going to tell you this time is I don't think we're just going to have one embodiment of the energy this time around. We're going to have potentially what may be many embodiments of Christ that come forward at this point in this age that we're currently in. Now, the one thing I will say is this. I do think there might be one who realizes before everybody else, but through that realization, that's going to spark the realization in others as well. And this is going to cause what I would say a mass a mass manifestation of Christ here in this age that we're in today. So I think, and based on experiences I've had, I've heard that, you know, in the past we used to send one back, and what ended up happening was instead of people actually listening to the message and embodying the principles, they would end up worshiping him, making him into a divine figure, making him into a divine God, and it ultimately destroyed the purpose of the entire message. So in my eyes, if you have a mass manifestation of Christ at this point, then we get to the worship starts to go away, because now we see that more people, more humans are capable of enacting that divine spark within them, that Christ within them, that we now know we're not worshiping anybody more. We're moving into the embodying phase of these teachings and these principles. So that's why I think, in my own perspective, that we're not going to get one solo reincarnated avatar of Christ in this age we're currently in. We're going to get a mass manifestation within the human collective. So the worship thing goes out of the window. It's not made into a divine figure or something that's unattainable anymore. And you will begin to see this kind of take hold as an embodiment of these principles as opposed to worship. And thank you so much, Out of the Blue. Indeed, Christ within, know ye are God's divine reflections. Diana, what are your last thoughts on that before we sign off?
So I agree with what you said, but there's cosmic reasons. So that's a frequency issue. With Jesus, there was a lot of tinkering to squeak in the seed that became him, because everything was more tightly bound. So getting just one in the past was because that's all they could fit in. They could, like higher beings trying to help us, these beings themselves want to coming down to help. They could barely squeeze in. But in the mid 1700s, they actually expanded the energy. What Jesus did already centered a sonic boom of expansion. And in the mid 1700s, you can hear this in the human design learnings, but it has a play over all of humanity. So the human went from being 7-centered to 9-centered, meaning we were expanded in the middle of the 17th century. And you can watch history start to show that we are now bigger energetically. And I think everything that you can feel right now, the raw person that wrote this original material died before this continued to happen and progress. And we are now much more expanded, meaning, yes, there'll be lots of Jesus incarnates, but not the Christ consciousness, because Christ is an actual layer of reality. So being able to embody the Christ energy means that your auric field is big enough and strong enough to hold that. And it's why we do all this work that we do, to get to a space of holding more of that, because you are God. Absolutely. That's inside you and you are God. But this human mind, body, soul, this human and the mind need to be expanded enough to fit that level of soul. Like our souls are streaming through that Christ stream right now. So every single person has the option to be a Christ figure. It's having the expanded awareness enough to embody that. So absolutely, there'll be tons of Jesuses, tons of Christs. And we're already on the path there, and it's continuing more and more and more every day.
Exactly. And alrighty, guys, Diana's got to head off. She's got some parent responsibilities to handle today. And other than that, guys, Out of the Blue, I just sent you a message on the YouTube chat. Go ahead and add me on X if you have X. I do have a lot to say about the bloodline of Cain and the Cain and Abel lineage as well. Maybe that's something we can dive into on the next episode. But other than that, everybody, I want to thank all 107 of you now. Geez, like I'm so grateful to be sitting down with 107 of you today. This is amazing. And thank you, Out of the Blue Phoenix, as well. But other than that, guys, thanks for joining us. We'll be back next Sunday. We'll touch base on some of that homework. We'll have some other cool things to talk about. I will edit up the title so there's no confusion of that. But thanks again, guys. It was great sitting down with all of you for this Sunday ministry. And we'll be back next week. Same time, same place, guys. Have a good one. Take care, everybody.